So picture this. You're in the gym, you're pushing hard, and then all of a sudden you hear a pop. This sudden sharp pain, it shoots through your shoulder. You've got a torn tendon. And you go to the doctor and they say, it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks before you're back to full strength. But what if there was something that could cut that recovery time in half? Or, imagine you've got gut issues like IBD or ulcers or chronic bloating. And again, you hear about this mysterious peptide that could help where nothing else has. Well, let me introduce you to BPC 157. It's got biohackers buzzing and athletes whispering and researchers scratching their heads. So is it the real deal, or is it just another flashy compound with more hype than science? So BPC 157, it stands for Body Protection Compound 157, which is kind of a clunky name, but it gets the point across. And it's a synthetic peptide, which is just a small chain of amino acids. And I actually discussed in the first video in the series about what peptides are. So if you're interested in that, I'll make sure to pin to it at the end of this video. And it's derived from a protective protein that's found in gastric juice. So it's part of your stomach lining, which is designed to keep your gut from digesting itself. But the kicker is it doesn't work just in the gut. So there's studies that have explored how BPC 157 could have a potential role in things like muscle and tendon healing or accelerated bone regeneration, gut repair in conditions like IBS and ulcers, and even nerve repair and potential neuroprotection. So while its origin is gastrointestinal, its ambition is full body healing. Now let's break this down. I've used this analogy before, but your body's like a construction zone. So an injury, that's a pothole in the road. Normally your body is going to dispatch white blood cells and fibroblasts and growth factors. And that's great, but it's not exactly fast. So imagine BPC 157 as a 24/7 emergency response team. It's going to roll in with floodlights and cranes and bulldozers, and it starts patching things right now. And here's what it seems to do. So angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels. And you can imagine how more blood flow is going to lead to more oxygen and nutrients where they're needed. It also has been shown to reduce inflammation, and that's going to help to prevent excessive scar tissue or chronic damage. Cell survival, BPC 157 appears to protect cells under oxidative stress, which is key in trauma recovery, and interaction with the nitric oxide system, which may support vascular health as well as nerve repair. In fact, some animal studies even suggest it modulates serotonin and dopamine pathways, which could explain early theories around mood or brain-gut connections. Think of it this way. If your healing system is a small town repair crew, BPC 157 is like flying in an elite rapid response task force with high-tech gear. Faster repair, less downtime. Now let's talk evidence. The animal studies are where BPC 157 really shines. In terms of tendon healing in rats, what they found is that BPC 157, it accelerates tendon reattachment, and it also helps to prevent tendon rupture under strain. Now for gut healing, so in models of IBD as well as NSAID-induced ulcers, and NSAIDs are things like ibuprofen, it reduces inflammation and promotes mucosal repair. And in terms of neuroprotection, there's some rodent models that actually show regeneration of nerve fibers as well as improved motor function after injury. So far so good, but what about humans? And that's where things get a little bit murky. So, we don't have randomized control trials and there's no phase 3 studies. There's anecdotal success stories and a few very early human applications, mainly in off-label therapeutic settings or observational case reports. Bottom line, the preclinical data is very compelling, but we're going to need more data before we can say it absolutely works in humans. How is it being used? So despite the lack of formal FDA approval, BPC 157 is being used in real life, especially in biohacking and longevity circles. Popular uses include things like muscle and tendon injuries, chronic gut inflammation, so again, IBD or leaky gut, and experimental treatment for nerve damage. And in terms of how it's taken, so you can either take it subcutaneously, usually in the belly fat, and the typical doses range from 250 to 500 micrograms once or twice a day. There's also oral capsules, which are easier to take, but they're less bioavailable. Some say they work well, though, for gut-targeted effects. And an important note is this is not FDA approved, and most peptides are sold as research chemicals. So this means that quality control varies, and ultimately it means that if you're interested in taking any peptide, it's really important that you are working with a provider who's comfortable prescribing any of the peptides, just to make sure you're getting it from a good source. So what are the risks and side effects? The most commonly reported side effects include mild dizziness, nausea, as well as irritation at the injection site. But here's the big concern. We don't know the long-term effects. BPC 157 encourages angiogenesis, which is great for healing, but it's not so great if you have undiagnosed cancer lurking somewhere. Tumors also love new blood vessels. So while there's no hard evidence that BPC 157 causes cancer, the theoretical risk is something to definitely be aware of, especially if you or your family has a cancer history. And in terms of the legal status, so it's not banned by WADA, but it's also not FDA approved. And it's available through compound pharmacies or online peptide vendors, often under research use only labeling. So should you try it? Here's the deal. BPC 157 may be a future breakthrough, or it could fade out with future trials. If you're going to consider trying it, make sure you first research it heavily. Also, choose a reputable supplier and ideally through a medical provider. Get your labs done, especially if there's any cancer risk, and don't use it as a crutch. Physical therapy, nutrition, and sleep, those still really matter. And if the human trials validate what we've seen in animals, this could really change the way we think about recovery. So what's the bottom line? BPC 157 is one of the most exciting and controversial peptides in the recovery space. The early data is fascinating and the real world buzz, it's loud. But we lack solid human trials, so it's still experimental. If you're dealing with a nagging injury or gut issue, it's definitely worth exploring carefully when done under medical guidance. And just remember, it's not magic, it's a tool. And like any tool, it needs the right hands and the right context in order to work. I really hope you found this content helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video that we're going to do in our peptide series, where I'm going to be talking about TB500.